Hey everyone, it's Tania Farran here with you with another Monday evening of Parent to Parent. I'm excited to talk to you today. I hope you're having a great Monday. We've had some crazy storms in our area, so fingers crossed I get through this without having any interruptions. I've been kicked off twice today for power outages, but we're staying safe. So let's make sure that we do that. So hope y'all are safe in your area as well. I wanted to remind you that I am the author of Raising the Well-Adjusted Child, A Parent's Manual. You can find my book on Amazon. And it is a great book for parents for any age range of your kids from infancy to 18 years old. It's a great book for you for that. I also host parenting workshops, book studies with parents. So if you have a parent organization or a group that you would like to, sit down with me and we can have conversations, I'd love to get that organized for you. So that is another thing that I offer. But tonight I'm excited because I have a great guest. I was introduced by another person to have them on this show. And Ariel and I chatted on the phone one day and we talked, 20 or 30 minutes. It was like we had been friends for a long time. And I've got some amazing things to talk to her about today. So without further ado, we're going to bring up Ariel Farkash. I hope I didn't say April. My mind, I've got a mental block of April. Ariel Farkash up to the stage here. And we're going to talk about lesson plans to life plans. So welcome, Ariel. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you again, too.
Did I call you April in that intro?
No,
oh,
you
good.
said Ariel.
My brain just kept saying that. I don't know why. But anyway, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to switch our spots here because I want you in the limelight and these comments can cover my face. So that's okay for that. So Ariel, tell everybody a little bit about you.
I am a special education teacher and a mother to a child who has autism. And it has been a journey. So that is what I usually speak and advocate for.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, honestly, we were organized and brought together by Nicole, and she had shared with me that your son had done some was writing in a book with her. And so she said, oh, she's a mom. I think I'll pass her to you and you guys can talk. And we started talking about that. And, it just had a great conversation, just chatting on the phone. So I talk to people all the time. Like if you've got that opportunity for that coffee chat, take it, because it's always great to get to know some people. So let's talk for a minute. Before you had children, you obviously were a special education teacher. What brought you into that field of being a special education teacher?
So special education found me. I originally went to school for elementary education. And at the time, the position that was available to me was a special education job. And I took it and I said, let's give it a try. Let's see where this path leads us. And so I took the job and I absolutely loved it. I loved advocating for my students. I loved learning about their strengths, where they struggled, how to advocate for them, how to show others that work with them, how to, better learn who they are and what their needs are. And it really is a path that I'm glad that found me.
Nice. It is a true calling, don't you think?
Definitely. And again, I didn't even know that it was something that I was being called to do, but it was an absolute wonderful path. It has been.
And how much time did you spend teaching in special education?
Over 20 years.
20 years of teaching in special education. That is a long career in that. Mm-hmm. I love that. There's so many components to it. And we're going to dig more and more into special education as time goes on. I'm just now getting to my first full year of having this live show on Mondays. And so we'll have to bring you back for some more conversations. I know we've also got some people in the audience I'd like to say hello to have stopped by today. So take a minute. Thank you, Jackie, for joining us. It's always sweet of you to come. And you might know this young man, Jacob. Thank you for joining us and commenting. We appreciate you. As well as Leslie Flowers. Thank you so much for being here. I believe she probably is going to get to know Jacob as well. Mm-hmm. She's here from North Carolina. LinkedIn user, thanks for being here. If you want to go ahead and just, CJ Scarlett, thank you so much for being here. She'll be on the show soon as well. We're excited to have her. Christy Williams, thank you for being here live from Florida. She's a 2350 Network member. And Dr. William Lane from Delaware, thank you for joining us. And then Linda Meyer from Canada. Hi, Linda. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate your time. And, you know, if you have any questions in the, you know, go ahead and drop them in the chat and we'll grab them as well. I also want to direct you to the bottom of the screen. The YouTube channel for this is Parent to Parent Talks. So you can also subscribe to that channel so you never miss an episode of what we're talking about. But let's get into this. So I got to meet your wonderful son, Jacob. You have one son? You have more children?
I have more than one. I have Jacob and another son.
Okay, two sons. But
Yes.
I got to meet Jacob last week and be on his podcast. And when you and I were talking, you had talked to me about some things that kind of drove that change in your life of from writing lesson plans to maybe creating some life plans.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
So as a teacher, of course, a special educator, you write IEPs for your children. As a person who worked in education, I was in an elementary school, and the IEPs, either I created them or the diagnosis had already come with the students. So then I was just updating and recreating a lot of the things that they had previously come with. So now here I was faced with my own child, and I knew what to do as a special educator, but I didn't necessarily know what to do with my own child. And so it was very difficult to navigate. Even though you would think that I would know the path, I felt like a fish out of water for many years because I did not know how to navigate the system prior to entering elementary school. So that was a big learning curve for me.
So you want to tell everyone what's a little unique about your son that's making you make these decisions in your mind?
So Jacob was originally developmentally delayed, and he was nonverbal, and he had regressed. He had some verbal capabilities, and then they completely disappeared. And so we had to figure out what services he needed, how to get him diagnosed with something to qualify for these services at such a young age, because at the time he was about 18 months old and the regression was setting in pretty quickly. So he was developmentally delayed, diagnosed that way for probably the first 7 years of his life. And then he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it's that's a time in your life. And that's an area that, gosh, we should have a panel discussion on at some point, but that's a time in your life as a parent where even being an educator, you don't know what to do.
I had no idea.
You have no idea what to do and how to help your child. And then you start asking questions, right? And you probably talk to your pediatrician and you talk to friends. And at 18 months old, our kids aren't typically always going to school. You know, some parents stay home with their kids. Sometimes they go to grandma's house, they go to an aunt's house. And, you know, so they're not really being able to be observed with an educational lens to look at and say, oh, we're seeing something here to help, you know, this is what you could maybe do to, you know, we're seeing in some ways to remedy this situation or aid in it or help it. So, yeah.
And I didn't have friends or anybody that were going through this. So I really was alone navigating this alone. My pediatrician didn't really feel that anything was wrong. They just kept saying, he's okay. He's young. He'll grow out of it. Or, you know, you'll see either he'll develop or we'll deal with it later on. And as a special educator, I just didn't feel like something was going on the right path. It just didn't seem right to me. I just couldn't let it be. Yeah. So I started to ask more questions and dig a little deeper. And I had met a speech pathologist at a Mommy and Me class, actually. And she said to me, you need to call early intervention. And I said, okay, well, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's where I went. I made the phone call.
So is early intervention, so in Missouri, I'm in Missouri, we call that Parents as Teachers. And so it's a program for birth well, actually they do prenatal visits as well, but birth through 5 years old, to come in and do some, analysis of your kid's growth and development. So that's the same thing. Okay.
Exactly. Yes. So some states call it early steps, some states call it early intervention. And
Hmm.
so different terms to describe birth through, approaching school age. And then you eventually age out of that capacity.
Right. And so imagine, like, you and I are both educators. And I remember, just a side note, I remember being pregnant with my second daughter and having parents as teachers come for my
Mhm.
firstborn. And I thought, oh, I'm on the right path. Like, this is great. And then she's like, I didn't know you were expecting. We could have been doing prenatal visits. I'm like, I didn't know that wasn't even an option, and I didn't even really know what parents as teachers could do for my kids,
Mhm.
just in even that early development, or what to really look for, and how to get them socializing. Like, there's so many great things with it. So I'm glad that you found someone who told you, reach out.
Right. Yeah. Because I honestly had no idea at that point in time. But thank
Mhm.
goodness for her, because she was able to point me in the right direction, and it really did help. It was life changing.
Sure, sure. So did she recommend, did that advocacy, group, were they able to, like, recommend doctors to go to, or programs to put Jacob in?
So what ended up happening was they came to the home, and I had to fill out an entire packet of
Yes.
information. I had to get medical, information to supply them with as well. Eventually, they came to my home. Then we had different evaluators come to the house in different areas. They did speech and language pathology. They did OT, PT, special education. They did a whole evaluation, and then they determined whether he would be eligible or not, which he was eligible. And based on that meeting for eligibility, we then determined that he would receive services in the home. So they came to my house. It was like a revolving door. People were coming and going constantly, but it was helpful. They worked with him for 30-minute time frames, all the different providers that came and went from the home. And like I had said, he was nonverbal. So at first they taught him some sign language, but unfortunately they didn't teach me sign language.
Oh,
So again, I couldn't communicate with my child.
right.
And that was difficult. So we had to find an alternative to that, something else that would work. And we created a binder system with Velcroed pictures, and Jacob was taught how to use the system. And it was something that he could show his needs and wants, and, try to communicate through the pictures. And it was really helpful. We had a travel binder as well. They made a smaller one for us to be able to go places with. This way he wouldn't get frustrated and not be able to communicate. And we wouldn't obviously be frustrated to know what he needed or wanted. And then they started to teach him verbal communication skills, even if it was just a sound of one
Mhm.
of the words that they wanted to say, and then build upon that.
That's incredible. Like, incredible. I'm imagining maybe this is someone you might know. She was a miracle. Very
Thank
cool.
you.
Very, very cool. And Russ, thank you for being here today. We appreciate you joining us from Salem. Josette, great to see you. Thank you for joining us as also. Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us. So good to see you all tonight. Hajazi, thank you for being here. Georgeline, thank you for being here as well. And Nicole, thank you. Yes. So amazing. So thank you, Jacob. Even on your hardest days, don't give up. And you didn't give up, Jacob. We are so proud of you. Oh my gosh, so proud of you. And so, what made you decide, now I have to leave this career? I'm leaving
Mhm.
my career. I've got a son. What age was Jacob when you did that?
So I was working actually for the same school district as Jacob was attending, not the same school, but the same district. And when he was graduating fifth grade, now verbally communicating, um, but he was still in a smaller class setting. And so the transition from elementary school to middle school, the programs changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was going to be a very different program than he had ever had any experiences with. And they had told me, and again, this was somebody who was my supervisor, in addition to being somebody who oversaw the students and the entire district, told me that, well, when he fails, we will change the course of his academics. And I said, no, we've come so far. We are not going to fail. That is definitely not an option or an answer that anyone ever wants to hear. Mm-hmm. And so I made the decision that I would have to resign from the district, and I was also going to take my child out of the district. And we placed him in a school that was more appropriate for him and his needs at that time in his life. And so that's been the turning point. And it was definitely a hard decision. It was not something that I ever thought it, would come to, but you have to go with what the right path is and know what your child needs and believe in what they have to do, follow their journey and go forward with the path sometimes that's chosen for you.
Right. Exactly. And you do have to do that, right? You have to advocate for your child. So what tips do you have for parents who are raising a child with autism? There's probably a ton of them, but what do you think of right now?
I guess it's important to trust the journey, know your child, who they are, what their capabilities are, what their strengths are, what their struggles are, and advocate for them. Don't give up. It's not always an easy journey. It's something that is definitely going to sometimes keep you up at night. You will be researching on the internet, sometimes finding groups and people and answers to things that, you may or may not need, but you have to just trust the process and sometimes go with your gut instincts. If you know that something doesn't feel right, then you have to be strong and advocate and trust that.
Yes.
Trust
And I think so too. I think that advocacy for your child is so important. Your child. Mm-hmm. And again, I come from the school districts as well, from that experience of 30 years. And there are rules and regulations sometimes we have to follow. And as a parent, you do have to advocate for yourself. And if you find something different that's better for your child, you have to do that, or something different. You have to do that sometimes. I totally agree with that. And I love that there's so much school choice for kids now. And I think that is so important for kids to find the right places to go to school. And so you kind of touched on it, and Dr. Lane also has shared this, and he'll be on the show in a week or so, I believe. He'll be here talking about this also. But how did you help advocate for your child during that IEP process? So going through, and whether it was an IEP reeval or the initial meetings, how did you advocate for your son?
Well, it was very hard to be the person on the other side of the table. Originally, I was the teacher, right? So when you're sitting there and you're reading these things, and before I had Jacob, you would sit and read these documents and think that you were doing a great job as the teacher on the other side of the table. And then all of a sudden you become the parent and you're sitting there listening to these things and you think, oh my goodness, can he do anything? Why are we talking about this child on paper sometimes as if he's just, something written in ink on black and white. Sometimes it can be very overwhelming and discouraging, and it shaped me as a better educator to sit on the opposite side of the table, eventually. But as a parent sitting there were times that sometimes you couldn't even absorb what they were saying. It was really difficult. But I had to learn to be strong. It came over time. I was sitting in meetings many times, very emotional, things that you just never thought you could sit and hear. But you have to kind of get through it. And then eventually I learned to get a little stronger and speak up, because that was what was going to be reflective in the document. And when somebody had this IEP in front of them, I needed to know that it was really individualized and personalized to show and share what he was capable of. So I had to grow a thicker skin and become a better advocate. And I would recommend, as difficult as it is, to try to do that for yourself, for others to,
Yeah.
follow in that path. Or, there are advocates that sometimes can support you and help you and guide you with the process that it's very hard to navigate.
I want to touch on a couple of really important things that you just said. First of all, you had to flip the sides of the table, right? You really
Mhm.
want to always originally giving the parents this information about their child, which, I think as educators, we see so much often. It's like, oh, they have this
Mhm.
and they have this and they can do this and they can't do this and they can't do this and they can't do this. And, sometimes we get this long leg of what they can't do and we forget to look at that positive, but we're trying to fix that what they can't do, right? And so we shed the light on that. And we don't really realize, because we see it all the time, how impactful it is to the parent that this is their child. This is whom they love, they've born, they've raised, and we go about it all business sometimes, and we forget that emotional side of the other side. And so I think you switching over to that part and even being, was probably very enlightening for you, and in even being talked about things that maybe you didn't, like you were just saying, like, I didn't really understand all of the things they were saying.
Mhm.
So imagine a parent coming in who has no experience in education other
Correct.
than their own personal education.
Mhm.
So that maybe getting thicker skinned, or even just the bravery of saying, what does that mean?
Exactly.
Tell me
Right.
more about that. What does that really look like? And being present with that. And I always tell parents, an IEP is considered, for those of you that don't know, is an individualized education plan for a child who has a learning disability, another health impairment, things like that. And so we put together goals for these students to help them maybe achieve at a higher level, whether it be in reading or math. And then they also have speech goals and language goals and OT goals and PT goals, which is occupational therapy, physical therapy. So it could be any of those things. It could be very small IEP. It could be a very long, lengthy IEP. And it sounds like your son had a lot of supports. So it was probably very long, probably very overwhelming,
Mhm.
and a lot of information. And so thank you for sharing that, in your perspective of that as a parent. This is your son,
Mhm.
and this is, where your heart is. And so you do have to advocate for what is best for your child. So I'm looking forward to continue those conversations. Um, what's been the hardest parenting decision you've had to make?
Um, I guess when we had to change the course, and follow what he really needed. Understanding him as an individual at each point in time and making those really hard decisions, because there were very many of them. Um, when he first transitioned out of the home-based early intervention that was coming into the home, and then he was placed in a preschool that was
Mhm.
going to give him some socialization in addition to the support that he needed in the special education field, and then making that decision to move on to another school from there because that one wasn't, necessarily fulfilling all the goals and things that were necessary for him as he grew and developed. And then moving homes and making choices that were really life changing for my family. Believing in Jacob
Mhm.
and just knowing that we had to trust the process, even if it wasn't something that we had, full support on from family members or friends that maybe were lost along the way because they didn't quite understand the journey that we had to be on. Um, and that's okay. It's something that Jacob was the most important thing to us. There was nothing that we would do to prohibit him or stop him from, you know, achieving whatever path it was, whether, he had to learn and do anything, whatever the options or the outcome was. I had to know that there was no stone left unturned.
I love that. Yes, as a parent, what an incredible statement, to, advocate for your child and know that, um, you left no stone unturned,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
And
I'm not
he,
gonna give
yeah,
up, right?
yeah,
Just like
you
you said,
just like
Jacob
Jacob
said,
said, you
"Don't give
never,
up."
yeah, even on your hardest days, don't give up. And
Mhm.
so I am going to tell you, and you tell me, this wasn't one of our questions we were going to talk about, but Jacob is a thriving sophomore in high school right now and
Mhm.
has his own podcast. And y'all, I was on his podcast last week, Thursday, Friday. I don't remember what it was, but I had the best time with him. He is an incredible kid.
Thank you.
And network members, I have a story to tell you because he was the only person I've talked to who was able to just figure out what the 2350 network stood for. And I believe that part of our conversation was recorded, so I can't wait to find
Yes, it
that.
will be aired.
So talk to everybody about what you got Jacob going on and what he's doing now as a sophomore.
This is all what Jacob wants and what he desires. So Jacob is in love with being in the spotlight, from a child that was nonverbal to somebody who speaks continuously and nonstop. He is my superhero. I am just so proud of who he is and all that he's continuing to become. So Jacob is an author, an illustrator, a podcast host, and he just loves to share his journey. He loves to speak to everybody and hear what their journeys are. He is just really in love with being front and center and speaking, sharing everything. He loves it all.
He did. I mean, he was ready, he was prepared, he was just prompt, he was pleasant, he was funny. I just really enjoyed. I could have sat and talked to Jacob all night. We could have just talked about whatever. I can just imagine what your home is like. It's probably pretty funny.
Yeah. He has, I mean, they told us, no, don't expect anything from him. They would tell me never. And I would look at them and I mean, of course, I would be hysterical.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
and then after I cried, I would say, nope,
No,
he's gonna something. I don't know what, but
yeah,
something. He's going to be something.
I
And,
love
you
it.
know, he will. He's continuing to defy all the odds that were stacked up against him. And I'm so proud of him. And I'm glad that you got to meet him and see that. I
Me too.
can't wait for more of the world to see who he is and what
Oh
he
my
has to
gosh.
share.
He is something else. He really is. I love it.
Thank you.
So as you're taking care of him all the time, and this is something, when we're parents of special needs kids,
Hmm.
and I'm sorry, I'm going to stop for one moment here. Jackie, yes, absolutely. You want Jacob on your show, 100%. Okay. So
Thank
you
you.
can reach out to Ariel and, yep, I'll get you connected. But anyway, since you're supporting, when we have special needs kids, we sometimes our self-care takes the back seat.
Hmm.
So how did you find ways or how do you find ways to take care of you?
Well, there was a lot of time that I just, was so caught up in trying to find the next thing or the therapy, whatever, you get caught up in that. And there weren't any support groups when Jacob was younger. I really was,
Mm,
very alone. I'm not going to lie. There were some dark times, that I felt very alone. Luckily, my husband was always in complete agreement with anything that I came up with. I mean, there were some things that I just said, we have to, it's going to be, but he was always, right there with me, supportive, helpful every step of the way. And aside from that, I did eventually later on find some support groups to join, and that was extremely helpful. Even though, our paths may have been somewhat different, we still had children that had special needs, so we could all communicate about that. And it was really helpful. It's been, pretty good to have support in that regard. But I also enjoy reading, or sometimes I'll take a drive and just clear my head and, go do some errands so that this way it's something different to
yeah.
focus on. those are usually my go-to things, or a walk. I'll take a walk.
Mhm.
I'll walk my dog. Things that just kind of get you out of that moment to
Yeah.
refocus. And
And you
you
and yeah, and I was talking to another mom. We've done a couple shows together, and you're never really out of it. You never stop worrying about your kids or thinking about your kids, but just to take that little brief mental break, and think about something else and turn your focus to something else is so healthy for you to do.
absolutely.
Jacob, I know you're in the comments here, so thank you so much for doing that. Will you drop in this comments here your podcast links or YouTube channels for people to be able to follow you?
Mhm.
A lot of people complimenting you, Jacob, and telling you you're the best mom.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
That
very much. It continues, it's
it
just
does.
something that I, just like Jacob, I won't stop, every step of the way. Look, things are ever changing. You have to continue to advocate and just figure
Well,
out
yeah,
every next step.
and I was calculating here, it was probably 20-ish years ago when I remember some of our leaders in the education field came to talk to us about autism.
Hmm.
That there were going to be, 1 in 5 children, and I don't know if that's the real statistic. I seem to remember that were going to be diagnosed within the next few years, that our schools were going to change and what it was looking like. And I can imagine you as being a new mom with this diagnosis really not having any support because
No,
there probably wasn't any in the very beginning 15 years ago. It was probably only 5-ish years old, fresh. There really wasn't anything. So thank you for being on here and sharing your story with people. We'll have you back on again. I've already got some
great.
ideas for another reason to bring you
That's it.
back. But
I'm
if you,
so excited. I would love that.
yeah, absolutely. We've got lots of things to talk about. So two things. What's your favorite part about being a parent? And then leaving parents with one tip.
My favorite part about being a parent is everything. Um, the ups, the downs, the roller coaster ride that comes with it. The happiness, the just watching them develop and grow into, the humans that they each are becoming, their individual self. I I just have always loved being with children since I was young myself. I mean, so I love it all.
I love it.
And what would I say to parents? Trust the journey, honor their timeline, know who each of your children, whether you have one or more than one, get to know who they are each individually, and no two children are the same. So just know what you have to do for each of them and advocate, be an advocate for them, each and every one of them.
I love that. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you, everyone that joined us in the comments section, who's watching this on replay on YouTube, on Facebook. We appreciate you being here and being a part of this conversation. Share this out with other moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas that are, really working to help support their children and, that may need to reach out to Ariel or Jacob, who might want to, have some great role models and some support. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate everything.
Yeah, yeah. We'll go ahead and end this. I'll catch you in a minute afterwards, Ariel. Bye, everyone. See you next Monday.
Bye.